Ivy remembered her old school. The damp, musty wooden chairs. The whiteboard smeared with chaotic chalk scribbles. A sly, taunting laugh rang out behind her. That day, Ivy had hidden in the bathroom. But the moment she tried to open the door, water crashed down from the ceiling. Every thread of her clothing soaked, heavy and clinging. The laughter outside sliced the air like knives. A strip of paper, stuck to the door, screamed, "Monster teacher." Ivy remembered the smell of mold and muddy earth curling around her feet. Her own reflection twisted and broken in the cracked mirror. All those memories shrank into a hard, cold knot as Ivy sat huddled in Willow Creek. Her hand squeezed the strap of her backpack tighter, like she could crush her fear if she just held on hard enough. The classroom loomed, silent and heavy. The sound of chalk scraping the board buzzed in her ears, like the whispers from her old school crawling back to life. "You're such a dung rock. Who's that stupid, seriously?" Ivy kept her head down, pretending she didn't hear. But inside, the blades dug deep. In this new history class, nothing had changed. The teacher stayed cold and distant. The kids whispered behind cupped hands. Ivy met every stare that stabbed like needles. Her first lunchtime at Willow Creek. She carried a small lunchbox from home, sat at the furthest corner of the cafeteria she could find. Around her, tables clattered and kids shouted. Talk of brand-name clothes, shiny new cars, late-night parties. Ivy stayed quiet. On a shadow nobody wanted to stand near. A crumpled ball of paper rolled to her tray. Ivy unfolded it. Only 2 words inside. Useless trash. No signature. Unneeded. She knew who had thrown it. Only at Willow Creek could cruelty come wrapped in silence like that. Ivy crushed the note in her palm, swallowed the shame down deep, and kept on eating. The noise never stopped. It slashed through the air like 1,000 knives. I realized it, finally. Every soul at Willow Creek had a place, and Ivy Brooks wasn't welcome anywhere. The hallways at Willow Creek stretched long and dark, walls bloated with dark, spreading stains, ceilings stitched with cracked plaster and flickering yellow light. Every step echoed wetly on the grimy tiles. The scrape of her sneakers whispered like old gossip. Hand lifted to hide her away, Ivy felt herself getting smaller with every step. She moved through the flood of students, invisible. Her eyes snagged on a photograph pinned to the wall. The Willow Creek basketball team. Front and center stood Logan Price. Flashing a smile, too confident, eyes too sharp. The way he stared into the camera made Ivy's skin crawl, like a hunter sizing up prey. The bell clanged, echoing down the corridor. Ivy tightened her grip on her backpack. She hurried into her classroom. Ivy yanked up her jacket collar, trying to shield her face from the slashing rain. Rusted-out trucks rumbled past, throwing up greasy waves of muddy water. She pressed herself against the curb, dodging the filthy spray. The street thinned out, hollow and deserted. Only the shriek of the wind and the slap of Ivy's sneakers on slick brick remained. Ahead, the streetlights flickered weakly, like the dying breath of something old and mean. Ivy walked faster. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She felt it. Someone was following her. Footsteps so light they barely touched the ground. But enough to know. She didn't turn around. Instinct screamed not to. The footsteps folded into the rain, vanished as Ivy slipped into a narrow alley. The streetlights here had been dead for years. Only thick, choking darkness remained. Ivy gripped her backpack harder. The damp walls reeked of mold and rot. With every step, she could almost hear her skin brush the cold concrete. A small, wicked giggle floated out from the shadows. Ivy jumped. She whipped around, nothing there but rain and blackness. The darkness swallowed everything. Ivy's feet slipped, stumbled. Then something rolled out from the side alley. A battered old rubber ball. It bounced once, twice, then bumped against Ivy's shoe. Instinctively, she bent to pick it up. But a voice crawled out of the dark. "You're just another ball, kicked around and forgotten." Ivy flung the ball away and ran like hell. She didn't stop until she saw the dim yellow light of her front porch. The Brooks sign swung wildly in the gusting wind. Her mother, Evelyn, stood in the doorway, an umbrella clutched in one hand, her face pale with worry. "Ivy, good Lord, where have you been?" "Eve." Ivy didn't answer. She flung herself into her mother's arms, shivering. Evelyn held her tight. Out there, beyond the gray curtain of rain, a figure stood watching. Immoving. Eyes locked onto the Brooks house. That night, Ivy couldn't sleep. Rain battered the windows like ghostly fingers tapping. Her room was steeped in the faint glow of her desk lamp. Ivy curled under her thin blanket, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. Every tiny sound made her flinch. The soft creak of the hallway floorboards. The whine of the wind through the cracks. The steady drip of water from the gutters outside. Together, they formed a symphony of dread. She touched the scrape on her knee, a grim souvenir from earlier. The fear wasn't fear anymore. It had wormed its way deep, rooting itself in muscle and breath. Ivy squeezed her eyes shut, trying not to cry. But the tears came hot and fast. She didn't want her mom to know. She didn't want her to worry more than she already did. Uneasily, Ivy clutched her old stuffed pillow. Outside, the rain poured harder. And somewhere, hidden in Willow Creek's darkness, eyes were still watching her, waiting. Ready for the perfect movement. The next morning, a gray, cold sun draped Willow Creek in a dirty shroud. Ivy woke up with her eyes swollen and sore. The distant blare of a yellow school bus horn echoed through the air. She pulled on a faded hoodie and left the house without breakfast. No one at school waited for Ivy. No one said hello. They slipped past her like she was just another crumbling piece of the old walls. Stepping into class, Ivy felt Logan's stare. She didn't have to look to know. It sliced across the back of her neck, cold and sharp. Through the whole lesson, Ivy tried to focus on the lecture. But the tapping of a pen against the desk behind her rattled her mind. When the bell finally rang for break, Ivy bent her head low, gathering her books. She didn't see Logan leave. She didn't have to. He was still there, waiting. The girls' bathroom sat at the end of the second-floor hallway. The white paint on the door was peeling and cracked. Ivy slipped inside quietly. No one else was there. The drip of a leaking faucet echoed in the stale air. She picked the last stall and closed the door. Footsteps sounded. 1. Then 2. Someone added. Ivy held her breath. A shadow drifted past the crack under her stall door. She heard whispers. Couldn't tell who. Couldn't tell what they said. Just broken sounds, like wind sighing through a crack. Suddenly something dropped to the floor and rolled. Ivy cracked the door open. A piece of paper. She bent down and picked it up. Scrawled in red ink were the words, "Leave before it's too late." Ivy's heart twisted in her chest. She tore the note into shreds and flushed them down the toilet. But the call didn't leave. Someone was playing a game of hunt. And Ivy Brooks was the brand new prey in the woods of Willow Creek. At lunch, Ivy sat alone in the farthest corner of the schoolyard. She nibbled on a dry, tasteless sandwich. Her eyes flicked around, cautious. In the distance, Logan and his crew laughed and joked, loud and careless. But now and then, Ivy caught Logan's eyes sliding toward her. His stare wasn't loud like the laughter. It was quiet, calculating. Our game had begun, and Ivy didn't even know the rules. That afternoon, Ivy left class. The hallway was nearly empty, her footsteps echoing off the tiles. When she reached her locker, her stomach dropped. A red marker screamed across the metal. "Nobody wants you here. You don't freak." Beside the words, a crude drawing of a girl hanging from a noose. Ivy's chest tightened until she could barely breathe. She tried to wipe the words away, but the ink only smeared, spreading like a wound. Eyes flicked over her, cold, blank, uncaring. No one helped. No one asked. Everyone just kept walking, like it had all been arranged beforehand. At the end of the day, Ivy hurried toward the school gates. A light drizzle misted down from the gray sky. Behind her, she heard the clatter of wheels. She turned. Her bike lay in a twisted heap, chain ripped clean off. Someone had sabotaged it. And once again she felt Logan's gaze from across the lot. He wasn't smiling, just watching, slow and patient. Ivy swallowed hard, clutched the strap of her backpack, and started running. Running from Willow Creek High. Running from the nightmare that was tightening around her. But she knew, the faster she ran, the tighter the invisible net would pull. Day 2. And the game had officially begun. By the time Ivy reached home, night had swallowed the town. The porch light flickered like it was dying. She raced inside and slammed the door, bolting it against the darkness, clawing at her heels. Her mother, Evelyn, bustled around the kitchen. She glanced up, worry flashing in her eyes, but said nothing. Ivy didn't say anything either. What was happening at Willow Creek was something she had to swallow whole, all by herself. Later that evening, when Ivy went upstairs, she found an envelope wedged under her door. No name on it. Hands shaking, Ivy opened it. Inside was a photograph. Grainy shot of her sitting alone in the schoolyard, biting into her sandwich. The photo was taken from a distance, blurred and sneaky. In the background, she could just make out Logan and his crew. scrawled underneath in jagged handwriting. "See you." Ivy dropped the photo like it burned. She backed away, her heart hammering. She looked around her familiar room, but somehow it didn't feel like hers anymore. It felt like even here, even in her own house, she wasn't safe. That night, Ivy fell into a restless nightmare. She was lost inside Willow Creek's endless, rotting hallways. Mold smeared the walls and water dripped from the cracked ceiling. Footsteps chased her, closer and closer with every second. She ran and ran, but the exit always slid further away. A laugh, deep and cruel, echoed in the dark. Logan stood at the end of the hall, twirling a length of rope in his hands. His eyes glowed like a cat's, bright and wild. Ivy screamed, but no sound came out. No one heard her. No one came. She woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, her heart hammering in her ribs. Outside, the rain tapped against the windows like cold, dead fingers. Ivy pulled the blanket over her head, trying to shut it all out. But she knew, tomorrow it would only get worse. Because at Willow Creek, fear was just getting started. Tuesday morning. Willow Creek was thick with mist, the air cold and wet against the skin. The trees lining the school gates drooped like tired ghosts. Ivy dragged herself into class, feeling like she was carrying the whole gray sky on her back. Today everything was quieter than usual. The students gathered in tight little clusters, whispering, sneaking glances at Ivy as she passed. She felt it, but she forced herself to ignore it. The bell screamed through the halls. Ivy slid into her usual seat, her eyes staring blankly out the fogged-up window. Condensation blurred the glass, soft and cold. She absent-mindedly drew circles in the mist with her fingertip. Suddenly a soft clatter sounded under her desk. Ivy looked down. A scrap of paper, taped carefully to the underside. Her hands trembled as she peeled it off. Scrawled across it in messy handwriting. Second period. Old storage room. Come alone. No name. No need. Ivy's stomach twisted into knots. Second period crawled by, every second stretching out like gum on hot asphalt. When the bell rang, Ivy stood up quietly. No one stopped her. It was as if Willow Creek itself was in on the secret, part of the game. She walked down the freezing corridor, turning toward the path that led to the old storage building. The rusty iron door rattled in the wind. Ivy pushed it open with a trembling hand. The stench of mold and wet wood punched her in the face. Inside, it was pitch black. Only a thin blade of light slipped through a cracked window. Ivy stepped inside. Behind her, the door clicked shut with a soft, sinister snick. In the darkness, Ivy held her breath. A faint creak. The squeak of shoes sliding across old cement. Her voice breathed against her ear. You think you can run. Ivy jumped, spinning around. The only broken crates piled high. Rusty chains dangling from the rafters. Laughter bubbled up, thin and cruel from every corner. No direction. No escape. A hand clamped down on Ivy's shoulder. She screamed and jerked away. But the hand only gave a soft squeeze before vanishing. When she spun around, there was only empty, aching space. On the wall, under the flicker of weak light, letters appeared. The weak don't survive here. Written in fake blood, but the coppery stink felt all too real. Ivy bolted, slamming her body into the door. She ran across the schoolyard, gasping for air, heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, the laughter chased her, slithering like invisible ghosts. Willow Creek had set the trap, and Ivy was now completely caught inside it. Ivy raced to the girls' bathroom. She locked herself inside the last stall, pulling the door shut with a sharp snap. Her hand clamped over her mouth to muffle her ragged breathing. Cold sweat glued her shirt to her back. Footsteps echoed in the hall outside. Agents, calm, slow, deliberate. Someone was looking for her. Ivy clutched the strap of her backpack, like the thin fabric could shield her somehow. A small piece of paper slid under the stall door. Ivy's hand trembled as she picked it up. Blurred ink, wet and smeared, spelled out, "You won't survive until Halloween." Ivy's heart hammered against her ribs. Halloween was only a few weeks away, and those few short days now stretched ahead like a long, slow death sentence. That afternoon, Ivy tried to slip out of school early. She pushed through the noisy crowd. Suddenly, a red balloon bumped against her foot. A blue. In the middle of the schoolyard. Ivy bent down to pick it up, but stopped short when she saw the faded writing scrawled across it. "Your turn is coming." She backed away, her face bloodless. The crowd around her kept laughing, shouting, oblivious. But Ivy knew. Someone was watching, and the game was escalating. That night, Ivy couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, the hallway light outside her door flickering in and out. Around midnight, she heard a faint clink at her window. Wise lowered. Ivy jolted upright, her heart pounding. She crept toward the window, peeled back the curtain. No. Just a small object dangling from the latch. A silver bell. Ivy, hands shaking, cracked the window and took it down. Tied to the bell was a scrap of paper. "Whenever you hear the bell, remember, we're close." Ivy slammed the window shut and yanked the curtains tight. But even in the heavy silence, she could still hear it. The faint jingle, soft as breathing, of her bell ink her hand. From somewhere out in the darkness of Willow Creek. From the ones who were watching. Sleepless. Endless. Relentless. Wednesday morning, the air at Willow Creek hung heavier than ever. Ivy walked into class with dark, hollow eyes, her body aching from lack of sleep. She could feel every stare cutting into her skin. But when she looked up, everyone pretended not to notice. A cruel psychological game. A deliberate, merciless isolation. As Ivy sat down, a low giggle floated from the row behind her. Old, rotten. Halfway through the lesson, while the teacher's back was turned at the blackboard, something small and sharp sailed onto Ivy's desk. A box cutter. Small. Zoik. As a sharp. Ivy stared at it, her heart hammering in her chest. Scratched into the blade were the words. "We." Ivy quickly slid the blade into her sleeve, terrified someone might see. But inside, the fear had already sunk in, deeper than ever. During break, Ivy tried to hide out in the library. But crossing the west hallway, she froze. spray painted across the red brick wall in massive, screaming letters. Ivy Brooks, you should disappear. Students walked by, some smirking, some giggling. No one hit it. No one helped. Willow Creek had passed its judgment, and Ivy was the one being hunted. At lunch, Ivy curled up in a lonely corner behind the school. The wind bit hard, cold and sharp. Above her, the bare tree limbs scraped together like breaking bones. Suddenly, someone kicked a cardboard box toward her feet. Ivy glanced around. Nobody looked her way. She bent down, opened the box. Inside was a small doll. Created its arms had been snapped clean off. Its eyes scribbled out in red ink. A scrap of paper tucked beside it. You'll end up just like this. Ivy's world tilted under her feet. She shoved the box deep into her backpack, her fingers trembling. But no matter how deep she buried it, she couldn't bury the terror inside. When the final bell rang, Ivy bolted for the parking lot. But as she reached it, she stopped dead. Her bicycle had been hoisted upside down onto a lamppost. The floor skills flatted with dripping red paint. A piece of white cloth fluttered from the handlebars, scrawled with a single line. Cindy won't have a way home. Laughter echoed from the shadows, sharp as needles against her skin. Ivy swallowed hard, her legs shaking. It felt like all of Willow Creek had turned into a giant trap. And she was the small, helpless prey being slowly ripped apart. Ivy stood frozen under the lamppost. The threat whipped in the wind like a death flag. A school bus rumbled by, faces pressed to the windows, laughing, staring. Or someone let out a gleeful hoot. Ivy clutched her backpack tight and ran, head down. She didn't want anyone to see the tears burning her eyes. When Ivy got home, a black envelope was waiting for her on the doormat. Her heart shriveled in her chest. She hesitated, then bent down and picked it up. Inside was a photograph. A photo of her mother, Evelyn, standing outside the corner store. Taken from a distance. Across the picture, in blood-red ink, someone had scrawled, "Stay silent, and your mother stays safe." Ivy dropped the photo, her body racked with shivers. It wasn't just her anymore. Now they were going after her family. That night, Ivy tried to tell her mother she wanted to switch schools. But when she saw the deep lines of exhaustion in Evelyn's face, the worry hiding behind her tired eyes, she couldn't do it. She couldn't put one more burden on her. Ivy clutched the photo tight against her chest, burying her face in the pillow, swallowing her sobs. Willow Creek had its claws in her now, and it was tightening around everything she loved. The next morning, Ivy walked into class drowning in fear. Sitting on her desk was a small gift wrapped in black paper. Heedless around. Nobody looked at her. Nobody spoke. With shaking hands, Ivy opened the package. Inside was a small dagger, gleaming and sharp, nestled in a velvet box. And a card, with just 4 words scratched in furious strokes. "Knew it's garbage." Ivy fumbled to shut the box and hide it in her backpack. 1,000 silent screams roared through her mind. But on the outside, Ivy stayed quiet, pretending she was invisible, pretending she was already dead. The real nightmare hit on Thursday afternoon. Ivy was walking home, her backpack dragging heavy against her shoulders. The calmed and misting rain started to fall, soaking into her clothes. She hurried past the abandoned park that sat between the school and the neighborhood. The swings creaked mournfully in the wind, puddles gathered on the uneven ground. As Ivy crossed the open field, something lashed out and wrapped tight around her ankle. A rope. Someone had set a trap. Ivy pitched forward, slamming face first into the gravel. Pain exploded through her arm and skull. She scrambled, kicking to free herself, but the rope only tightened. Panic clawed at her throat as she looked up. A group of figures stood nearby, its faces hidden. But she knew. She knew those eyes. Logan Price, and the loyal pack that followed him. Cold laughter cracked through the rain. Then their footsteps retreated into the mist, leaving Ivy lying there, soaked, battered, and alone. By the time Ivy dragged herself home, she was covered in mud and blood. Her right hand was swollen, the skin torn and raw. Evelyn ran to her, panic flashing across her face. "What happened, Ivy?" Ivy just shook her head, tears mixing with the rain streaking down her cheeks. She couldn't speak. She didn't dare. If she named them, would her mother be safe? Or Ivy just clung to Evelyn, her whole body trembling. That night, Ivy burned with fever. In her fevered dreams, she was back in the park, tied down, surrounded by faceless laughter. Logan's shadow leaned down and whispered in her ear, "You'll never get away." Ivy jolted awake, drenched in cold sweat. Outside, the wind tore through the skeletal trees. Somewhere out there, a swing creaked in the dark. It sounded almost like Willow Creek itself was whispering along with the monsters. The next morning, Ivy forced herself out of bed. Her arm was stiff and sore. Every step felt like needles stabbing through her legs. Underneath the long sleeves, bruises bloomed from her elbow to her shoulder. The mirror in the bathroom reflected a ghost, sunken cheeks, dark circles, hollow eyes. Ivy barely recognized herself anymore. At school, things got even worse. Classmates snickered as she limped down the hall. Some even staged clumsy pratfalls right in front of her, laughing so loud it echoed. Logan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, cold eyes locked onto her. He didn't have to move. Just the weight of his stare was enough to make Ivy feel smaller, weaker. During homeroom, Ivy was asked to share her thoughts on the week. She rose slowly, gripping the edge of the desk for support. The room fell into a heavy silence. Every single eye was on her. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. A sharp whistle pierced the air from the back of the room. Someone snickered. "Get your tongue, freak?" She clenched her fists so hard that her nails broke the skin. But still, she couldn't force the words out. Couldn't. She just lowered her head and fled the room, the roar of laughter chasing her down the hall. That afternoon, Ivy hid in the old storage shed behind the football field. Light seeped through the cracks in the tin roof, dull and sickly. The smell of damp wood and rust filled the air. Ivy curled up in a corner, hugging her knees to her chest. In her hand was the box cutter from earlier that week. She flipped the worn blade back and forth. A foggy thought slithered into her mind. So she just made a small cut on her wrist. Maybe it would all be over. No more fear. No more pain. No more Willow Creek. Footsteps crunched outside the shed. Ivy's heart seized. She shoved the blade into her pocket. She held her breath. A moment later, it was only a stray cat slinking through the trash. Ivy sagged against the wall, hot tears spilling down her cheeks. Despair sank into every bone. That night, Ivy came home late. Evelyn greeted her at the door with worried eyes. Ivy just forced a brittle smile. She couldn't tell her. Upstairs, Ivy pulled out a sheet of paper. She started to write. A homework. Not a diary. A goodbye letter. Each shaky word dug deeper than the last. I'm sorry, I try, but here no one hears me, no one sees me. Deep in the night, Ivy stood by her bedroom window, the letter clutched in her hand. The wind rattled the glass like ghost fingers. In the distance, the street lights bled yellow into the mist. Ivy took a deep breath, and that's when she saw it. A figure standing beneath the skeletal tree across the road. Still muttered. Eyes locked on her window. Logan. No mistaking it. Ivy stumbled backward, the letter fluttering to the floor. She balled her fists tight. No, she wouldn't let them win. She couldn't. Then Ivy snatched up the letter and tore it to shreds. She didn't know how she would fight, but she knew she had to. She had to survive, even if the whole damn town turned against her. Ivy dropped onto her bed, gasping for breath. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny flame flickered to life. Fragile, fighters, but fierce. The next day, Ivy walked into school carrying something she'd never had before. Purpose. She no longer crept along the walls, no longer ducked her head to avoid their eyes. She held her head high, even though her heart still quivered inside her chest. Logan and his gang were waiting. They lounged on the front steps, their eyes prowling like predators. As Ivy passed by, one of them let out a mocking whistle. Look, the freak learned how to walk. Laughter exploded behind her. Ivy gripped the strap of her backpack tighter, but this time she didn't run. Didn't hide. She locked eyes with Logan, her stare so cold that he actually faltered for half a second. In class, Ivy sat quietly, writing down every word of the lesson. Each time Logan tossed a pen or crumpled paper at her, Ivy calmly picked it up and tossed it in the trash, her face never changing. No anger. No despair. The silence drove them crazy. They wanted her to crack. But Ivy wasn't the same girl anymore. During break, Ivy sought out Ms. Marlowe, the school's discipline officer. Ms. Marlowe was the only adult in Willow Creek who didn't seem afraid of Logan. Ivy stood outside the teacher's office, clutching a piece of paper filled with everything she had endured. Every threat. Every attack. She knocked on the door. Once, twice. No answer. She tried the handle. The room was empty. A resignation letter lay on the desk. Ms. Marlowe had left. Ivy staggered back, her hand trembling. The only person she thought might stand by her was gone. That's when Logan appeared at the end of the hallway. Hands shoved deep into his pockets, a lazy smirk playing at his lips. He didn't have to say a word. His presence alone screamed it. You're on your own. Alone. In a world built to crush you. But this time Ivy didn't run. Didn't cry. She turned on her heel and walked slowly toward the schoolyard. Every step was a quiet act of defiance. The cornered animal wasn't afraid anymore. Ivy Brooks had awakened. That night, Ivy sat by the window, the desk lamp casting a pool of light across her determined face. Spread out before her was a rough map of the school grounds. Every alley, every hiding spot marked carefully. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. About reclaiming the pieces of herself they'd tried to destroy. The next morning, Ivy entered school with a backpack heavier than usual. But it wasn't filled with text. It was packed with the tools she'd prepared overnight. Alarm whistles, marking pens, and coils of rope tucked neatly inside her jacket. Step by step, Ivy was ready. During break, when Logan and his gang slouched their way to the west field, Ivy trailed after them like a silent shadow. She watched, memorized. They always gathered near the west fence, hidden from view by a thick hedge. Perfect. If there was a place to strike, it was here. At lunchtime, Ivy planted mini alarms in key spots. One under a bench, and one inside an abandoned locker. Another beneath the stairwell leading to the gym. With a single push of a button, she could flood the hallways with chaos. Confusion would cover her tracks. That afternoon, as Logan headed toward the exit, Ivy moved in behind him. Her heart pounded like a war drum, but her hands stayed steady. As Logan passed the darkened hall by the gym, Ivy hit the trigger. Alarms screamed through the air, piercing and shrill. Logan flinched, spinning around. Seizing the moment, Ivy darted forward, yanking a rope tight between a table leg and a wall hook. Logan tripped hard, crashing to the ground, his head slamming into a metal locker with a sickening thud. All heads turned toward him. Ivy didn't stop. She walked straight up to him, stood over Logan as he struggled to push himself up. And for the first time, Ivy spoke, her voice clear, cold, and sharp. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Silence fell over the hallway like a hammer. Students who once pretended not to see stared at Ivy now with wide, stunned eyes. Logan, dazed and pale, lost his grip on the throne he had built out of fear. He looked small, as small as the fear he had once ruled with. Ivy turned and strode through the crowd. Head high, shoulders back. No one laughed. No one whistled. Willow Creek had just seen something it never thought possible. A small girl, who, with nothing but her own sheer will, changed everything. That evening, Ivy sat at her desk, the yellow light casting her shadow long across the wall. In front of her lay a blank sheet of paper. She began to write. Line by line, carefully. Not a confession, but a list of everything Logan had done. Every scar, every humiliation, every fear. Ivy wanted to remember it all. Not to ache over it, but to turn it into strength. The next day, Ivy wasn't alone anymore. She started reaching out, quietly approaching the other students who had suffered under Logan's reign, even if only silently. A whispered word, a slight nod. Little by little, Ivy built a small circle. Not friends, but survivors. People who had once stayed quiet. But now, seeing Ivy stand, they found a spark of hope. Ivy shared her plan with them. No revenge through violence. No falling into Logan's game. They would fight with the truth. Drag him out into the light. One by one, they began gathering evidence. Threatening texts. Recordings of cruel insults. Photos of bullying scrawled across lockers. Slowly, patiently, Ivy and her new allies wove a net that couldn't be denied. Meanwhile, Ivy waged a silent war on another front. She didn't confront Logan directly. Instead, she made him doubt. A thoughtful look as she passed him in the hall. A faint, unreadable smile. Whispers he couldn't quite catch. Logan, who once thrived by controlling other people's fear, now began to taste it himself. He grew erratic, quicker to rage. More than once he exploded in the middle of the hallway for no clear reason. And people started to look at him differently. Not with fear, but with disgust. Willow Creek, once Logan's fortress, was cracking. And Ivy, the girl they once called a misfit, was doing what nobody thought possible. Shifting the balance. Ivy didn't stop with gathering evidence. She planned every detail of the final strike. She assigned roles. One group would spread the proof to teachers and the school board. Another would record Logan's secret outbursts. Everything would unfold in silence. In the shadows, Ivy also started leaving small notes tucked inside desk drawers. Quiet reminders that everyone deserved respect. That fear only held power if you let it. Those nameless notes spread through the school like sparks. Slowly, but surely, Logan felt it. He spun in circles, searching for the source of the rebellion. But Ivy and her allies were too careful. No fingerprints. Only a growing sense of dread settling in the heart of the tyrant. One morning, the school bulletin boards were plastered with copies of the threatening messages Logan had sent. No signatures. No one to blame. Only the naked truth laid bare. At lunch that day, Logan stormed into the cafeteria like he always did. But instead of fear, he met cold, distant stares. The kids who once laughed with him now backed away. Those who once cheered now whispered behind his back. Willow Creek had turned. Ivy sat quietly in the middle of the lunchroom, watching. No gloating. No triumph. Just calm. Because she knew the real victory wasn't in making Logan suffer. It was in reclaiming her own freedom. That night, Ivy received an anonymous text message. "You'll pay for this." She simply smiled and switched off her phone. She wasn't the trembling little girl anymore. Ivy Brooks held the reins now. The next morning, Ivy walked into class with steady steps. On the blackboard, someone had written in thick, angry red chalk, "Ivy Brooks equals traitor." The room was dead silent. Every eye turned to her. But Ivy didn't flinch. She picked up a piece of chalk. And underneath the angry scrawl, she wrote, "Silence feeds monsters." No one dared say a word. In that moment, Willow Creek held its breath. And Logan, cowering at the back of the classroom, finally understood. The game was over. On Monday morning, Willow Creek seemed to wake up from a long, grim sleep. The threats, the cruelty Logan had unleashed, they were secrets no longer. They sat openly now on the principal's desk in the hands of every teacher, every parent. There was no hiding, no more excuses. Logan was called to the principal's office. As he walked down the hall, Ivy stood waiting. She didn't move aside, didn't lower her head. She looked right at him, steady and cold as a frozen lake. Logan, pale and shaken, dropped his gaze. He picked up his pace, as if afraid that if he met her eyes, he might crumble into ash. News spread like wildfire across dry woods. Parents were furious. An emergency meeting was called. Logan and his family's feeble excuses couldn't bury the truth anymore. Logan was immediately suspended, pending a full investigation. No one defended him now. The ones who once cheered him on now turned away without a word. For the first time in years, Willow Creek breathed easier. No more whispered fears in the hallways. No more averted eyes. Just silence, peaceful and strange. And at the center of it all stood Ivy Brooks. The day Logan left school, Ivy stood at the second-floor railing, watching in silence. Not with triumph, but with a quiet, aching sadness. Because she understood. The wounds Logan had carved into Willow Creek would take a long time to heal. And even she realized, was nothing but a broken product of a poisoned world. But Isaac wouldn't let pity blur the edges of justice. You sow the wind, you reap the storm. Even if that storm was born from the silence of an entire town. In the months that followed, Willow Creek began to change. Sharing sessions were held. Posters declaring "Say No to Bullying" sprang up across the hallways. Classrooms buzzed with conversations about kindness and empathy. Ivy, once the target of their jokes, became a quiet symbol of courage. No one said it out loud. No one pinned a medal to her chest. But in the smiles they gave her, in the way they nodded when they passed, Ivy knew. She had won. Even the teachers who had once turned away were different now. Mr. Jenkins, who had once silently looked the other way, now led after-school programs on respect and resilience. Mrs. Walters, who had once brushed off complaints, stood before the school and apologized. Willow Creek wasn't just punishing Logan. It was trying to heal itself. The victory wasn't in bringing Logan down. It was in saving herself. And by doing that, saving Willow Creek too. One afternoon, near the end of the school year, Ivy stood alone in the courtyard. A soft breeze lifted the hem of her uniform skirt. She closed her eyes and took a long, deep breath. No smell of spray paint. No malicious whispers. Just the soft rustle of the leaves. The peace she had fought like hell to win. Ivy Brooks smiled. A small, quiet smile. Like sunlight breaking through storm-torn clouds. One chapter closed. New one ready to begin. In the distance, a group of younger students played beneath the old oak tree. Their laughter carried on the wind, bright and carefree. They no suspicion, no division. Willow Creek had changed. And Ivy knew this was only the beginning. She was no longer the scared, lonely girl they once ignored. She was the girl who broke the silence. The one who woke a sleeping town. Appreciate you staying with us. Not everyone gets to hear the untold. If this intrigued you, drop a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to The Untold Story to uncover even more.